there has been a distinct change in the Chinese growth path over a period of time. There was a sustained economic growth, a strong, they wanted to become a strong and powerful country. And there was sustained growth, better living standards they were wanting to achieve, and vibrant economy, etc. Now, with all this that they wanted to achieve for a period of time, internationally, there was a great push forward for the Chinese dream. And my belief is that this 2047 dream that people have been talking of is too far away. It's been pushed forward, brought closer. And China is a nation that has stepped on the gas to reach its ambitions much earlier than even 2047. So we have to be prepared for that kind of issues there. Thank you, Sangam Talks, for inviting me over for this session today evening. It's an important issue. And as time has passed, previously we used to say that China is an enigma, but over a long period of time, we have been able to study China in the right manner and understand as to what's happening in the country and their relationship outside globally. Now, the central theme of my talk is that there has been a distinct change in the Chinese growth path over a period of time. There was a sustained economic growth, a strong, they wanted to become a strong and powerful country. And there was sustained growth, better living standards they were wanting to achieve, and vibrant economy, etc. Now, with all this that they wanted to achieve for a period of time, internationally, there was a great push forward for the Chinese dream. And my belief is that this 2047 dream that people have been talking of is too far away. It's been pushed forward, brought closer. And China is a nation that has stepped on the gas to reach its ambitions much earlier than even 2047. So we have to be prepared for that kind of issues here. I'll take a step back and just discuss the issues as they've been developing over a period of time. Now, when we say 12th CPC, which when Deng Xiaoping took over in 78, but the 12th CPC, he made the dramatic changes. The Central Party Congress, it was in 1982, and they laid down a set of priorities. Said that there are big changes were made in ideology. Deng Xiaoping, and what Deng Xiaoping did next 20 years, Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao largely followed. So there was a 30-year period in which Chinese growth pattern was just about similar, which was about reform and opening of the society and the market economy. So there were serious domestic market reforms. So from state control, which was the larger thought process before the 12th Party Congress, there was extraordinary change made in the 12th Party Congress, and then there was an achievement carried out. And if you see 30 years of growth, China had achieved 9.5% growth pattern, which was kind of unprecedented in history, and it was a turbocharge, which it seemed. There was also a foreign policy orientation in the same period. It was thought that there should be minimum problems outside the outside world, have an overarching priority on sustained growth. Of course, China was still under the communist rule. There was Marxist-Leninist Party. But the 1956 to 1976, the class struggle that was spoken about in the communist, the Marxist orthodoxy, it changed. And that change was called growth first. Let's get wealthy first, and we talk about everything else later. In this duration of this 20, 30 years, United States helped China quite a bit to reach its levels. And then, of course, 2008 crisis helped. Then there was joining WTO in 2001 helped. By the time President Xi Jinping came up, China was already in a very good wicket, the second largest economy nearly. And it was on a growth path, upswing in all ways by 2012. Now, 2012 to 2017, which is rather recent, the first tenure of President Xi Jinping, there were not major changes being carried out. Of course, there were thought process of President Xi has already, changing over to in some manner. By 2017, it was apparent that the President Xi Jinping wanted to have there were some central contradictions. There was a necessity to deal with imbalances that have grown up across in China as a state. There was unqualified growth till that time, that in 2017. But imbalances came up in the question of inequality among people and, of course, environmental sustainability. By 2017, they were kind of oligarchs, they were rich people, billionaires across in China. The growth had gone up in various levels. So, in practical terms, by 2017, President Xi Jinping brought about significant changes in the 19th Party Congress. We all know about the constitutional changes. He said, okay, he didn't have anoint a successor. So, it actually gave a feeling that he would go beyond 10 years by 2022. So, that was one major change. But then, apart, there were changes in economic policy in 2017, which are very significant. And this was carried out by a series of interventions that he did, made laws and changed the economic policy in China. So, when we started this game in 1882, the state and enterprises were nearly 90% of the total the strength. But and private sector was only 9% in 80s. But that time, by 2017, the private sector became 60 to 70% of total GDP, and the state enterprises have dropped down to between 25 and 30%. So the state enterprises had gone way down, and there was a changed role between state enterprises and private sector, which was felt by President Xi Jinping as being not exactly as per Marxist orthodoxy and ideology. So that was one part of it, that he wanted to arrest the change of downfall of the state enterprises. Second is that there was a policy response to the technological sector and the infrastructure sector, which we have been hearing for quite some time. Alibaba, Tencent, Evergrande, Didi, these had become too big for their boots. So big that they were out of state control. And this was felt that, was a damage being done to the Marxist ideology, because these corporations have become just too large. And if you recollect, Jack Ma was speaking some things against the government, which was not liked by Communist Party at all. And the technological sector also had terrific amount of market control, which was also not liked by that time. So by data alone, the corporate wealth had become too big, and the imbalance with the inequality with the peoples of China was stark to see. So that was the second policy response that he wanted to change. And third was of course, what we have been talking about the last few years, the common prosperity agenda, which was the imbalance between the unsustainable inequality, which I mentioned, of the people. And this unsustained equality was a dilemma for the Communist Party. And these three changes is what he tried to bring about in 2017 and thereafter, till we came to that COVID period. Now, pre-COVID, already by 2017, 2019, China had begun to slow down. The economy was slowing down. It had left the 9.5% growth over a period of time. At the time when the COVID hit, it was already slowing down economy. By 2020, when the COVID hit, the economy was down to 2.3%. And, subsequent years, one of the years, it was also negative. And now also they're talking about, say, 5.2% is what's being spoken about, which is also way down of from what the Chinese were habitual in the course of 30 years period. So this is all because of COVID. And then, of course, the ideological changes that President Xi brought about were also dramatic. It brought pressure onto the peoples, and there were protests. Now, if you imagine, in 2012 itself, 2022 itself, last year, there were 6 very, very large protests in China, something which is unheard of. There was, if you recollect, there was a Evergrande, which was the protests on the real estate company. Then there was on mortgage, there were protests. There were in many counties, many states, provinces, there were bank runs, which also led to protests. And of course, we know zero COVID. And first time they saw people showing white cards. And there was a banner against President Xi Jinping, the banner man. Earlier in Tiananmen Square, we saw one chap coming in front of a tank, and he was called a tank man. So this time he was called a banner man. And the banner was put across that now this was not organized protests, but without organization, mass people, large number of provinces were out carrying white cards. This was, of course, showed that the changes that were brought about by President Xi Jinping in 2017 onwards, which brought the pressure on these private enterprises, also hurt the people. So there was 20th Party Congress. We know 20th Party Congress. In fact, I would say that the 20th Congress, which was just about 4-5 months ago, there is a sea change which has happened between November 22 till date. In last 5 months, there have been immense amount of changes in China which are evident, and it needs to be studied because this is what is turning out to be contemporary China. So one is that the protest led him to, on 7th of December 22, abandon COVID. Just 2 months prior to it, COVID means zero COVID policy. Just 2 months prior to it, in the 20th Party Congress, there was brouhaha about the zero COVID policy and how it has protected people, etc. But after 2 months and the protests that took place subsequently, and of course that fire that happened in Urumqi. So Urumqi, one of these buildings caught fire, and because it was under kind of gated community, the people were not allowed, the fire extinguishers were not allowed to go there. So people were burnt alive. It caused a nationwide protest in November or December. So, you know, these protests, people's protests in November, December last year led Chinese to abandon the zero COVID policy. This is a dramatic shift into how the country works. So the driving force, as I mentioned, was the white card movement. So party was also surprised that there was no organization to it. No, Tiananmen Square of protest in 1976, the protest actually was because Zhou Enlai died, about 1 million people had come to Tiananmen Square. And then, of course, the 89 protests. But this time, there was no Tiananmen Square, but whole nation were carrying cards. And also, the fourth quarter of 22, the previous 3 quarters, they were showing a little upswing of 2.8% of GDP growth. But this fourth quarter, it became evident that they would have negative growth. So whatever the policies were, in the course of 5 years before, by the end of 22, it was evident that China is going under tremendous amount of pressure. So there was annual work conference. Annual work conference is a very big issue for them. 15th of December 22, and President Xi Jinping came out. And this is after the party concert. He came out with 10 large policy corrections. Now, this is 2 months of the party congress. So, you can imagine things happening there. Some of these things which I like to highlight is, one is he changed the role of technological platforms. So all this pressure on Alibaba, Didi, and Tencent was gone away. Now we see Alibaba boss Jack Ma, who was in Japan for all this while, a year plus, is now back into China. So you can see the transformation that is happening only in the course of last 3 months. The role of private sector was certainly opened up in last year, and the common prosperity agenda, which means equality to the people, etc., it vanished. So the talk of common prosperity agenda is no more around in the Chinese matter. So there is a positive signal that the markets got, and the market started looking up since last 2-3 months. So now some policies, he said, there were continuation also. Like, for example, the state-owned enterprises, he said, okay, the protection to state-owned enterprises will continue. Wanted to boost. Now, what happened in the COVID times, that the consumerism of the world went down. People were not wanting to buy things because the recession and the inflation that has been caused by Ukraine war and by the COVID itself. Now the consumption, the largest consumption economy in the United States, showed a drop into consumption. And the manufacturing of the Chinese, they had no offtake. So, there was a changeover. So all this while China is growing based on external consumerism, they decided to change over to domestic demand. So that's a transformation that's come into China. But of course, he said, I am still orthodox on Marxist-Leninist policy. So they, if I read into this, or many people read into it, you find there are mixed signals. So he's saying, okay, I want to open up and also want to retain ourselves. So he wants Marxist communist. He wants to get on with state enterprises, but also wanted to boost now the private industry. So this is a confusing China in the course of the last 3 more months. So this course correction. So there were two, both ideology and private sector both have receiving mixed signals. Then in last month or month and a half ago, February, there was a party speech. So the party school speech is supposed to be a very national issue there. And while we say कि हमारे politicians तो बोलते रहते हैं, what's so great about a speech? But उनके में speech क्या है? Every word is deciphered by the 9.5 million party and everybody else to say बोल क्या यही उनका हुक्म यही है. The system is this only. So they listen to every word which is said. So the party school speech, it was important. They said, President Xi said, okay, the ideological definition stands, but the Chinese style, he started building up that our democracy, our system is better than the Western system. Look at how West is suffering. So he was till now he had not sponsored his own type of governance fostered on other countries. But here he said, look at this. Our kind of modernization is much better than what the West is doing and the Western democracies. So China is an alternative way of governance, which is what he said in the month of February as part of the Party School Congress. So these were valid thought process changing across there. And he, of course, came back to inequality and peace and income. And when he says inequality of people, he refers to three issues. The three issues also President Xi has brought about. First is income of the people must rise. Second is standard of living must rise. And third is the people should get employment. So these three things is what has been referred as the inequality issues in China. So as it stands by, even Goldman Sachs some time ago came up with a study that by 2025, China will cross United States as the largest economy. This is Goldman Sachs reports. But now Goldman Sachs has come another report. He said, no, for 2025, read 2035. Because of this changeover which is happening inside China, Goldman Sachs has already moderated the Chinese growth pattern to say it will take about 10 odd years more. Now, we bring China to this end. I'll come to geopolitics a little later. But there are headwinds. While it is growth pattern, there are headwinds. Demography becomes the biggest problem in China today. At one study, it was found out that they had overcounted 850,000 people in the overcounting, which is a substantial number of people overcounted. And then, of course, in the statistics of last year, the total population dropped by 1 million, which shows that the population is dropping and the older people are getting more and more. So that makes it dramatic because one child norm was continuing. Even now, when he changed the one child norm to 3 children norm, people are not keen to have children because they find it too expensive to buy a flat there and to feed the children and to put them into schooling. So the cost of living is such that people are not wanting to go back to even 2 child. 1 child is the barest thing what Chinese are there. So this is the fastest aging society in history. And by 2030, China will be very highly aged society. As per Chinese census figures, we don't have anything excess outside. We're just reading into what the Chinese are saying. So there are structural issues also. There is still a distressed property sector, and there are ghost cities. People are not buying houses because of lack of mortgages, etc. There is unemployment. There is weak growth of disposable income among people, and China has become #1 food importer. So the climate change has made a difference to the river, two major rivers, the Yangtze and the Yellow River, where many rivers have dried up, the dams have dried up, the rivers have become narrow. So the water supply for irrigation has reduced quite a bit. So there is a food scarcity. And China has become the largest importer of food grains and stocking. Of course, we know about energy. China is largely dependent on energy. It has also got a headwind in Taiwan, which is persisting there. Now I come to Chinese influence operations in the course of last 10 years. They worked hard. They have worked hard worldwide on improving the influence, and it's been done uh, dramatically and well-planned manner. So many of these larger media houses in United States and many other countries are owned and backed up by Chinese money. So there are influence being carried out in very many manners across into there because Hollywood, the Hollywood itself has got major of these firms there in Hollywood have got Chinese money. So no, nobody makes an anti-Chinese film. You can't make a movie which is anti-Chinese because Chinese own Hollywood now. I'm sure they must be owning something in Bollywood also. But so they have actually went across in influence operations in a very dramatic way. So the BRI, which we all have been knowing and all know about BRI, today 151 countries out of 196 have signed BRI. 151. And there is a trillion plus already spent on it. Now, we can say there is debt diplomacy and debt traps and all the other problems that we are associating. But what happens to a country that wants money? If IMF and World Bank have got rules and regulations, they look for money. If a government has to show in Africa, say, or Latin America, the growth pattern, they require the money. They have to take money from somewhere. So obviously, the money comes across from Chinese who don't ask questions. They have shorter loans, they have steeper rates of interest, and they don't actually write off loans. But then money is available. And they say, okay, you want to make a stadium, football stadium, we'll make the football stadium. So their people go across, make the stadium there, even though the stadium gets lesser utilized later, but roads and tracks, by railways and power sector. So the worldwide, including in Europe, including many countries, Greece, the largest port peninsula, belongs to Chinese. So, the number of 10 ports in Europe are Chinese who are making it, and they've got actually money pumped into this one. So there is a influence changing operation being carried out, and as it is, you say trade-wise, 127 countries of the world, the maximum trade they have with Chinese. Look at in the course of last 3 months, how many European leaders have gone to China. The German chancellor went there. Now Macron has gone. The European Union president is gone. The Spanish president gone. There are beelining people going to China. Why? Because they know you can't survive. Second largest economy. Most supply chains start and end there. The manufacturing hub of the world. They just cannot survive to get their countries without having the trade issues sorted out. So there will be a talk about Ukraine war and support to Russia and human rights violation in Xinjiang. That is fine. But the president of France, who went recently, took a 60-man business team across when he went across to China. So there are conflicting signals here. Trade is more important as the other issues, which are okay, then we can keep talking. So that becomes an issue here. And President Xi has started saying that China should become, and his words are, we should become credible, lovable, and respectable country. As we know, it's not a soft power. Chinese have a soft power issue here. So they said, we want to become lovable and respectable country here. And of course, he gets angry. Sometimes he says, if anybody opposes us, he will have his heads bashed against Great Wall of Steel. So he shows his anger if you oppose him. So there are intense amount of psychological operations on in the world being carried out. So as I mentioned, the changeover by BRI alone is tremendous. While we say that there are debt traps, indeed there are debt traps. Zambia is a debt trap. Sri Lanka is a debt trap. Pakistan, nobody knows what's happening in their economy. So there are intense amount of problems. But despite that, countries are still willing to take money from the Chinese banks and develop their own nation. So there is a serious issue out here. Now, in their military, if you see, $3 trillion they have spent in 30 years on modernization. The whole character of their armed forces has changed. And the ASPI reports, ASPI is in a think tank in Australia, which says there are 44 major technologies in the world. Of 44 major technologies in the world, 37 Chinese are leading, even leading the United States in defense, in space, in robotics, in energy, in environmental issues, in biotechnology, AI, quantum, advanced materials. So Chinese have done change their economy towards an innovation economy, and that makes a and they do a study called critical technology tracker, which actually gives out that the Chinese are way out ahead in technology. And then, of course, world's 10 of the top leading technological research institutions are in China. So they have, and of course, if you see the high impact research papers being published, China is publishing the largest number of high impact technological papers. So there is a change happening here. And so there is, all these changes show that China has great amount of influence. Now I come to geopolitics, which is the crux of it. So, spoken about economy and spoken about BRI and influence. Now, there are geopolitical ambitions and aims are not a secret. They want to become the preeminent power in the world. They have a Chinese dream, and there is great rejuvenation, superpower status, and you name it. All the cliches that being used across here are in use by the Chinese. So that's a important issue. So it starts with the part of the ambition is also this expansionism, which is what we are also hurt about, the expansionism that China is facing. So that's a very significant part, and the revanchist policy is important. China has a poor geography, very poor geography, where it's got an island chain, the coastal maritime frontier is the inimical countries which are not, China is not fond of. For example, you start from north, you come from Japan, and Japan's island, Okinawa, Taiwan, South Korea, Philippines, Southeast Asia, many nations, Indonesia, Vietnam, all these countries have got problems. So there is a kind of barricade around the maritime frontier. That's what Chinese talk about, the first island chain and break out of the island chain. So there is a problem around the maritime frontier. And that's why they are increasingly going to South China Sea and acquiring islands and the 9-dash line, etc. On the territorial frontier, Chinese have got 14 countries. They sorted out borders by give and take to many countries, except for India and with Bhutan now, which things are in the light now. So there is so now here I come to why India. What does China want with India? And this is the next part of my presentation. I say, is India a geopolitical challenger to China? Chinese trade is largely dependent on Indian Ocean, partly Pacific Ocean. And Indian Ocean, India's geography is so super that we have a peninsula with just 2,000 kilometers into the Indian Ocean. So the trade has to willy-nilly pass close to Indian Ocean, and that becomes a serious issue. India is also a geopolitical challenger in many ways. We are a country, whether they accept or not, we are a liked country. Nations of the world like us because we are not expansionist by nature. We are always there to help out countries that we want to. So we are a likable country. We are a growing economy. We have a young demography, 28, 29 years is our median age. And then there is, of course, immense amount of potential. We have a potential boxed in. Now that potential, by all the digitalization that's happened in India and all the changes that we see in the course of 6-7 years, we are breaking out of that potential that was boxed in. Our potential is coming out. So we become increasingly more challenger to the Chinese. So there is a issue here with the Chinese. So we are also modernizing our military. We are growing our economy. We are, in many ways, it would seem that this is a nation which is on the move. And that makes it, China is also, we are heading many fora today, G20, we're heading the BRICS, we are part of the SCO, RIC, whole lot of organizations India is now part of in the global. So there is a issue that India becomes a kind of a challenger. And now, because we were also showing a growth trend over a period of time, we have also been as assertive or as demanding on the borders to say our sovereignty, our territorial integrity is as important as the sovereignty and territorial integrity of any other nation. So we also demanded, and we forced our way across on the borders for quite some time, which was actually being felt by the Chinese starting 2013, 12, 13, when we had great amount of face-offs that were taking place, and we stood our ground against the Chinese. So they were also feeling that there is a challenger occurring here, and we have a growth path, and we have a military modernizing, which will be a future challenge to them. So there is where 2020 came in, when the Chinese decided, okay, enough is enough, and they did this salami slicing, which they did in South China Sea. Salami slicing means what? If you are not prepared in a place, you just take bit by bit, slice bit by bit, and just occupy the area. So that's what Chinese did in South China Sea. You take a rock and gradually build the rock and make a bigger island and make a runway there, make a heliport there, and you make some houses there, and you say, "Yeah, island mera hua." So they were slicing. They did this to South China Sea. They were trying earlier in Doklam or in Tumor or in Depsang, which they tried earlier in 2013, 14, 17, were not successful. So they did a multi-pronged attempt to salami slice us on the eastern Ladakh, which was the most problematic area in the entire 3,488 kilometers of border. Now, we all know about this history, and we have spoken a number of times over the last 3 years as to what's happened out there, and I'm not going to be repetitive about what happened into there. But in the course of since May 2020, there have been significant amount of interactions that have taken place with the Chinese. So there were 12 meetings of the WMCC, which is the EMIR organization. There were 17 core commanders meeting, and now this year there is G20, there is SCO, there is BRICS, and there is RIC. So there are summit meetings happening in 2023, which are a great amount of thing. So what are the Chinese saying about the borders nowadays? Since last 8-9 months, there's only one dialogue they've been saying. They're saying, we want to let the borders alone, and let's talk about normalized border management and control. This is the word they're using, normalized border management and control. So Wang Yi said so, and their spokesperson Mao Ling said so, and now recently, last month, March, their new foreign minister, Chen Gang, who had come here, said so. Let's start the border, all is well. Meaning what? This is normal. So Chinese are telling us that what is the border today is the normal border. The normal border means what? It means is that whatever we have denied you patrolling rights, since 2020, wo gaye. So that's finished. So where we are located is what it will be in the future, which is not acceptable to us at all. So there are contradictions here. Anytime you hear the external affairs minister or the external affairs spokesperson says, this is not normal, this is abnormal. Chinese are saying, no, this is normal. So there is a contradiction happening between the tone and tenor between India and China, what's been saying. They're also saying that we are not de-escalating, meaning they brought so much force out from outside, Xinjiang, etc., opposite the borders. They said this force is going to sit here, meaning that the threat of this larger amount of force which has been brought into Tibet and to opposite eastern Ladakh will remain there. So that's a threat will be there. Then they're making infrastructure in a big way, oil pipelines, airports, helipads, roads and transport, everything is changing across there into this area. So, and then on our own side, they have created some buffer, and there is a fait accompli. Okay, fait accompli. This is what it is, and this is what they are calling normal. How is this normal? When you retain 4 divisions opposite you, and you say this is normal, but this is not normal. This is abnormal. If this is abnormal, we have to be cautious and prepared for it. So there is this contradiction is which is playing across in our discussions across with the Chinese. And then, he spent 7.2%. Of course, India is not the biggest threat to China or challenger to China. Their problem is Taiwan, and their biggest problem is United States. But India also stands in a large territorial frontier. And then, so what we call it, today China has become a threat in being. It exists for us, and we just cannot forget it. And we have to be prepared for this threat in being. So China, in the course of all these CBMs And the protocol that was signed in 1993, 2096, 2005, for one moment, in 2020, threw all the CBMs away and all the protocols away and all the good discussions and everything went down the drain. And he did this Islamic slicing and denied us patrolling rights. How do we believe he'll not do with the buffers? There is a trust deficit. Why should we trust something having seen what has happened in the course of last 2 years? So there is this issue here which will stand. I must also add that China is the second largest economy in the world, is rising very high. Or PPP terms is the largest economy. I mentioned about their economy, and they've got great amount of global influence now across. Even Russia has become a younger brother to China. So they have also moved in a manner like the Global Security Initiative, the Global Developmental Initiative, Global Civilizational Initiative. They become great mediators. They mediated between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which we couldn't have believed some time ago that they brought rapprochement there. They have also worked and brought about some kind of a peace formula between Ukraine and Russia. No other country has done that. So they are also getting diplomatically and on international security more outgoing in nature. This is their ambitions which are rising more and more. And I'm sure in one time they will bring peace into Yemen, because between Iranians and Saudis, now the foreign ministers have visited again. They were talking in Beijing the last 2-3 days. So they will bring about some kind of rapprochement, which will bring some kind of a ceasefire into Yemen. So there is a change that they're bringing across in the world. Now, with all that, we have a trade of over $125 billion with China. Now, this trade, and this is the second largest economy in the world. And the supply chains have become so intricate that a cell phone and iPhone is not made into one country. It's made into 50 odd countries. Every country produces something. Supply chains bring this stuff and it is combined and made into a phone into, say, in the iPhone city in China. Now maybe Foxconn has come up to India. So in India, we'll also have a city, but India will not produce a complete phone. The cameras will be produced in Japan. The chip will come from Taiwan. Something else will come from. So the supply chains will move. So to say that the trade $125 billion, it's anxiety, all right. But the fact is that you just cannot get in till the time. China has the largest supply of lithium batteries. It's got the maximum amount of work done on solar, and we are looking for resources like that. So what should India do? And I'll end my talk with the last. This is my last part on economical frontier. It's very difficult to just say stop all kind of trade with China. It can't be done. The supply chains are such. But it can be said that we need to work on our vulnerabilities. There are issues of dependencies, we're dependent, but we have vulnerability also. A good policy came up some years ago regarding toys. It's seen some upward movement. Why should we buy toys from China? We should get on. Why should we buy furniture from China? We should decide about the vulnerabilities and the dependencies and work to this end to protect ourselves. API. But earlier we were all right in APIs in medicines, but we know we had a downfall. We need to work. So we ought to have a long-term plan to get out of our vulnerabilities and which are dependent on Chinese trade. On the talking issues, the geopolitical issues, I think there is in the world things are happening. It's important for us to continue the talks at the military level, at the diplomatic level, and at the political level, which is going to happen in the course of this year. So these are parallel mechanisms here. But having said so, we are also mindful of our territorial integrity. Can we delink the border and what is happening on the border from all other things happening in the world here? It can't be done. It cannot be done because Chinese have an expansionist and a revanchist policy. So we have to make sure, and I have 3-4 formulas here, we must make sure that there is no more Islamic slicing. What is there is there. Just put a, and Tangseh, which happened in December, clearly showed that we are stopping all issues regarding the any more Islamic slicing. So where we are stuck here. And we seal the body accordingly. Keep the build up on. Now it is it is pressure on India and Indian armed forces to be built up at that altitude in such large numbers and protect ourselves there on the border. But I think the threat in being, which I said, Chinese not doing de-escalation and making infrastructure and modernizing also, make sure that we have to have a force which is placed all along the borders, not in Ladakh alone, even in National Pradesh, to make sure that we deny Chinese, to keep the build up. We should keep making our infrastructure and keep sorting out our ISR, which is the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, to make sure we get better information. And of course, relationship with our friendly countries, which are also supplying us information and intelligence about what Chinese are doing on the Tibetan plateau. So there is this issue of making sure that we are aware what's happening there. We have to train hard and keep that talks on. So the fact is that because the Chinese have a tendency and you can't rely on them, there is a trust deficit. So while the trade will go on one end and the talks will go on the other hand, on the border you have to be vigilant. Otherwise, at one particular moment, Chinese will come. Probably they don't want a war, because a border war, a territorial war, the Chinese will have to face immense amount of grief on their own, because we are a professional force and we are well trained into high altitude warfare. But having said that, indeed, Chinese do not want a war. They want to reach the global pinnacle. To reach that, we have to make sure that there is no more attempts at a salami slicing, and we prepare ourselves in a manner that we tell the Chinese we are prepared in case you want to do so. Having said that, we can go across in parallel course of making discussions at various fora and keep discussing issues here to find better via media. Can we now? Firstly, line of actual control is a flawed thought process. You can't have a line of actual control our side and Chinese have a line of control on the other side. Both two lines of control. How do we manage a border when the two parties have not agreed to the line of actual control? Can we move ahead on doing some kind of delineation, some interim line or something which can come up here? Can we talk about de-escalating? Remove your forces there. When you brought from Xinjiang, send it back to Xinjiang. Some kind of reduction of force across the border. All these parallel tracks must continue, but we have to be prepared in case Chinese want to do more expansion.
We'll go to the question answer round. We have a few participants and the floor is open for you to ask questions. You may go to the reactions button at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand to ask a question, or you may type it in the chat box for me. I'll start with my question, sir. Last Sunday, they came up with 11 invented names for 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, which cover a large part of Arunachal Pradesh with Chinese names, and they've renamed Arunachal Pradesh with a Chinese name and claimed Itanagar and maybe 2 rivers and large tracts of this thing. I have not heard any reaction from the Indian government so far. Would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, so fine. One is that this is the third time that they have brought about names change in Arunachal Pradesh. It's not the first time that they have done. And they even changed the name of the state. They gave a new name, Zangnam or something like that. So be it. Some of the probable grid references which I read are not even right. They say there's a river there, there's no river there. So, maybe the thought was. But having said that, so be it. You name anything you feel like. That doesn't mean it's yours. Arunachal Pradesh is a settled area. It's our population, our people. They are people, they are part. We have a minister from the Arunachal Pradesh in the central cabinet. So if the Chinese want to change names, they can do so whatever they wish so. How does it matter to us? We don't. In fact, I think it's a good idea not to react. To tell them we're not bothered, you do what you feel like. It is just, it means nothing at all. So I think no overreaction is a better idea than to overreact and make noise. The Chinese are doing ABC here. 2005 treaty, there was a mention about settled areas, which was signed, which we said settled areas will not be discussed, or those words to that effect. And it's a settled area, it's a populated area, the people are staying. There is just no rationale to do this. And I think all this is their way of keeping the border under pressure. And it is that threat that I'm talking about, the threat that retains across there. So by sporadic nature, they did in Tawang. In sporadic nature, they will try any other place. They will also try many other issues of all kinds. So be it. I think we have to, by non-reacting, we are told Chinese, thank you very much. You do what you feel like, and that's all it is. It doesn't matter to us at all.
My question was regarding the salami slicing, which you have dwelt on for at some length. A couple of questions regarding that. First, what can possibly be China's psychology or reason or immediate aims behind the constant territorial expansionism which they have practiced not now but since the 1950s, as a matter of fact? Because with Pakistan, we have a definite historical background which specifically is regarding territory. However, with China, many times, my father also used to say, he was a defense official. He used to say, what actually grows there? There is actually, not giving into Nehru's statement, but if someone is actually trying to ingress into your country, what can China gain from it? They, in terms of stretch of land, they have nothing. It is not a productive land. It is not that they can, by just these invasions, come into India. And the follow-up question on that why can't India also do the same? China is sensible enough, unlike Pakistan, to really indulge in a lot of, active war. So, if we can beat them up and dash them up when they come at the border, there have been skirmishes and hand-to-hand fights, then why can't we also occasionally ingress into areas? Are we doing that? And if not, why?
Thank you. These are good questions, very valid questions. And you want me to go to 100 years in history. See, in the 19th century, this border was problematic. And there was, two lines made. One was made by something called Johnson Line. Johnson was a functionary of the Maharaja, governor of Ladakh at that time. And he decided on a mountain range called Kundun Range as that will be the border. And there were also British bureaucrats who were in the Chinese side, who were based in China. They were MacDonald and Macartney. They made their own line. They said Karakoram Range will be. So between the British bureaucrats, both of them, one working in Indian side, one working in Chinese side, made two different lines in about the same period, later half of the 19th century. So one is called Johnson, one is called MacDonald-Macartney line. These lines were the way it is. In 1914, 1915, there was a conference held in Shimla to decide the border between India and Tibet. But that time, Tibet existed here, and the Chinese representative was present there. Though he refused to be party to the thing. And there was a kind of a border, McMahon line was signed between the Tibetans and the Indians. British government in Shimla. McMahon line is only in Arunachal Pradesh, that area, which goes on peak to peak. But the line was such a broad line marked on a map that it was not a valid way, not the right way of marking lines. So, when we got independence, there was this confusion of which is the border, the Johnson line, the Macartney line. So it took us some time to validate issues, and we came across to the line that we have later on said, which is our map. The map shows a border is based on Johnson line in Ladakh, and of course McMahon line based in Arunachal Pradesh. The Chinese came up with a unilateral line on its own in 1959. Why? What logic? What thought process? What history? Nobody knows. So they came up with a line called 1959 line, which came up as part of a letter which was sent by Chou En-lai to Prime Minister Nehru. Now, if you follow that line in Ladakh, it gives an impression. See, Ladakh is a very peculiar area. There are mountain ranges, very high mountain ranges, and then there is a plateau. The plateau is what is Tibetan plateau. So on our side, there are very high mountain ranges. So we have taken Johnson line, which includes the Aksai Chin plateau, the entire area, as part of us. Chinese in the 59 line had pushed us away from the plateau and dropped us down the mountain range. So when they say Burtse is ours, Burtse is below the mountain range. So they say, okay, you have no truck on the plateau, which they feel is Tibetan plateau or all that areas under Xinjiang. Having said that, now that's the geography. The strategic geography is such that there is a differentiation in what we say and what the Chinese say. So strategic geography is the first problem here. Chinese do not want us to come to that area. So if I read into what the Chinese have done in the course of 3 years, they have actually denied us patrolling. See, this salami slicing is lesser of a territory issue, more of a patrolling issue, because the border was not decided. We were just dominating up to a line which we envisioned to be line of actual control, not Johnson line, only line of actual control. So we were patrolling. They were patrolling to their line. Now they have occupied a piece of ground, or this 800 odd kilometers, in which they have denied us patrolling to our line, which is based on that plateau, on Exaichen or Depsang plateau, as we call it. There is, they are pushing us away from that plateau. That is apparent in the way they have done that. So, having this is not, of course, it's unilateral. Of course, it is not any legality. There is no lawfare about it. It's all illegal. It is just you decide this is my line and you sort it out. Then that's a issue out here. Now, what are we doing? We are not expansionist by nature, by nation. We are largely status quo country in such matters. So we have taken a call on this, and we said, okay, we will protect a border. Now we are protecting it. We are protecting it in a manner that we deny any more of this so-called salami slicing, even if it is on a line of actual control of denying us patrolling. So we have now, before 2020, it is possible that the discussions that taken place from 1988 when Rajiv Gandhi visited thing, usse pehle bhi 1982 se a joint working group was sitting there. So, last 20-30 years, there was an attempt to bring about some kind of a rapprochement. It wasn't moving forward on the border, but there was an attempt to say, okay, cool down. Let's cool down issues. Let's amicably decide politically, diplomatically. So it was happening that manner. So we were not deployed on the border because lest some issues take place and something unprecedented happens. However, after 2020, we have said, okay, nothing doing. Now we are deployed. So now we are there, and we are there as we ought to be. It's as close as line of control with Pakistan is. So there is a transformation that has happened in last 2 years on how we are managing the border on the Chinese front than what existed prior to 2020.
Thank you for descriptively explaining that. That was very well explained, giving the entire border. Of course, I'm aware of this issue with the British diplomats and that is why I asked specifically the question with respect to the 1959, the change in 1959 onwards. However, my question still remains that many times we pitch this as a kind of it's almost as a virtue signaling, oh, we are not an expansionist country. Whereas fact remains that this is the reason that probably we are struggling also to maintain our borders against expansionist countries. Why don't we also occasionally do the salami slicing? Because, I mean, it is not that we fear, at least not in case of China, into a war or even, I mean, nuclear war or whatever, which is very far-fetched. So why don't we do the same? This is my question, that just managing and protecting has been our this thing for a very long time, but it's no longer a virtue. So what is the worst that can happen in a situation like that? Because the Chinese are also by nature historically a cautious people. So, I mean, why shouldn't it be totally based on reciprocity? And the moment they encroach, then we also, maybe from a different sector, we also encroach. Why are we not aggressive and consistently, aggressive? That is my question.
So, Nupur, you are on war path. Let me put it this way. Look, we did a operation and occupied the Kailash range. And of course, Kailash range is known across there, but we may have occupied more areas, which I am not at liberty to state. But we would have done much more than the Kailash range, and which all, and maybe we are also done something plus plus and holding on to those areas. So, which is not necessary for us to state it. Let's have confidence in our people that they also respond into an aggressive manner. We are not a pacifist country in warfare. Let's not take it that we are only accepted. We captured Hazipit Pass. We hit the Karachi harbor. We have retaken all the heights in Kargil. We went and fought in Pakistan into the territory. And in 62, also in the many areas, we fought as bravely as the Chinese would understand, especially in Ladakh, and even in Arunachal Pradesh. So, let's not push ourselves and saying Indians are all pacifists by nature, Indian armed forces, and we are, Shanti Priya. We may be Shanti Priya, but we have the gumption to take issues across the borders. And yes, I would state that we have done, we would have done in many other areas outside the Kailash range, and I'm not very sure as to which all area, because I'm also in now civil dress. But the fact is that we have done it. Now, when there is need, we did an operation. When there is need, and when we decide, we would also have other choices available to us to undertake it. And let's have confidence in our people who are the decision makers, from the political matter, political to the military people, and they will take actions as required and when required to do so. The question is a worst case scenario. Okay, worst case scenario is escalation that leads to a war. That's a worst case scenario. Why? There are forces located there. There are missiles deployed there. There are artillery close on the borders. There are tanks on either side. There are units of formation. So, when you say a worst case scenario, an escalation to a war, that can take place. And escalation is always on the cards. And let's not forget it, an escalation implies, actually fighting the way out into this one. And nowadays wars are not fought on the borders. The wars are fought well across into hinterland, because warfare has just gone across from the borders to the nations. So the Chinese talk about system confrontation, system destruction. System is anything. System is command and control and all. So that escalation is possible. And I will say that let's have confidence in our people that they are doing the best that needs to be done on the borders.
There's a question from Saurabh ji, who says that some people argue that trade should be completely stopped with China, a country which has killed 24 Indian soldiers in Galwan. I have a related question. Now, with the G20 happening in Srinagar, can it be seen as India snubbing China along with Pakistan and Turkey?
The second question first. It's not a question of snub. Yeah? We have a G20. We have a G20 meetings being carried out on multiple fora. All states, I was reading somewhere, I think 51 districts in India where G20 meetings are taking place or something. Large number of districts, I don't know the exact figure. From South India to East to North to West, we had a meeting in Arunachal Pradesh. Whenever we have a meeting in anything in Arunachal Pradesh, the Chinese make noise. When we had a G20 meeting, they came up with some new names. J&K is a part, yeah. It's just a part of our territory. And now the 370 is also gone. There is just no discussion. So the Chinese may not attend the tourism meeting in that place in Kashmir. And maybe the Pakistanis won't come. Pakistan is as it is not part of it. But the Chinese won't come to them. So be it, yeah. It's our territory. It's our country. Why can't we hold a meeting? If they don't like it, it's our way of telling them, okay, enough is enough. This issue has been raised, and Indian government has been very forceful in many ways, especially about the apps, etc., which were denied and closed and wound up. And so there have been responses. But, it's very simply said that you ought to have closed trade. That's the second largest economy, the largest manufacturing house. It's the largest manufacturer. So, even if you want to buy, say, solar panels, we want to get solar panels. We want to change over to a new format of energy in India. And where do we get solar panels from? Finally, the China will supply. Either you take it directly from China or they'll supply through third party, third country. So this is how trade goes across there. So to say total delinking of trade, I personally feel it's not possible. It cannot be done because trade lines have changed. There is a deglobalization on. There is a attempt for deglobalization. There is a de-dollarization on in many ways. So we need to study, like I said, what are our vulnerabilities and what are dependencies. Now let's work to get out of our vulnerabilities. If APIs to pharmaceutical industry is a vulnerability and the Chinese can threaten us one time, let's work to create infrastructure within the country to or alternatives so that we can get out of those vulnerabilities. And there are many dependencies which we can over a time will say, okay, don't buy furniture, don't buy toys, and many other things can be stopped across there. So we have to, and I believe there is a deliberate exercise on. It cannot be done. It cannot be said that you totally delink it. The total delinking in the kind of globalized world order that exists today is not simple. Can't be done.
On a lighter vein, sir, but not a joke, that the Chinese rocket 2D Long March, recently in March 23, it crashed and it disintegrated in the atmosphere over Texas. And 4 times, this was the 4th time that debris from a Chinese rocket has crashed back onto Earth. They've been doing this since, and they were the ones who were posting pictures of Indians burning pyres while them Chinese launching rockets. So in Punjab bhi say ki Chinese hai, kitni der chalega?
So there, I think things are changing. They are becoming an innovative economy. There was that time 20 years ago when we said, yeah, ये toy है ना, ये इतने दिन ही चलता है. एक बार flip flap करेगा उसके बंद. But nowadays it is that the Chinese are a innovative economy. They are producing very high class stuff. I said that technologically they are very sound and they're getting better day by day, including crossing United States, which United States Congress themselves says that they're crossing. So that. About rockets crashing, I think when we're developing such kind of technology, there are always some problems can take place. So when a rocket crash is all right. They are now going to go into low orbit satellites after Ukraine war. You learn from Ukraine war. They learn from the wars. They know that there was the communication problem with in Ukraine, and Elon Musk and the SpaceX had to help out in low orbit satellites. So now the Chinese will start thinking about low orbit satellites for just in case something goes wrong. So there may be trials on many things. So I agree with you that they had a crash. But I don't think we should write them off on the space front also. They are doing great amount of work on space warfare.
Yeah, so probably that is the reason why European countries are making a beeline now. Macron is visiting China for trade.
So the maximum trade, European Union is the largest trading body with China. I mean, you can imagine how will they survive? European Union won't be able to survive. The Americans are not buying that kind of trade. ASEAN, Southeast Asia has got very large trade with things. But when you talk about European Union as a body, that's why they're making a line. Both of them, the president of European Union and President Macron went together to China. And there are one after the other now planning to go across there because, it's impossible to see. UK wanted to make a nuclear power plant and, the Chinese they also asked Chinese to make a power plant in 2016 and 2-3 years. And now Chinese have withdrawn. Okay, yeah, we want to have bad relations. We won't make a nuclear power plant. So, how will the UK get across to making a power plant now? So the fact is that the Chinese have expertise of many issues where global nations want to take advantage of it. It is as simple as that. And you are now getting money from the banks. I watch it now. What you see, BRICS will happen in August this year. If BRICS comes up with a new currency, R5, all 5 currencies are with R, no? Rial, ruble, rupee, renminbi, and South Rand. So R5 new currency comes up, they will be more and more tying up with the Chinese on trade issues across there, because and as it is, larger number of countries are now getting out of dollar and trading with China. The things are becoming more and more intricate as time is passing.
My question was regarding the question earlier, which was put to you by Saurabh. Of course, I find these statements a little childish, ki ye na kharido, boycott karo, and things like that. And I agree with you that earlier, China did have a problem of quality, but they have tremendously worked a lot in that direction. Now, the question is what India has done in that case. Now, we keep on saying that boycott Chinese goods, don't buy stuff like that. But fact is, this is something which not only Indians, but people everywhere all over the world are discovering that really they are in a big way into the supply chain, so much so that anything you buy, whether it is expressly written made in China or not, something inside that item comes from China. Now, I personally have seen, even while buying stuff, whether online or in shops and stores, etc., a whole lot of high quality stuff that you need as a growing consumer economy. They do happen to be from China. And when you try to source the same thing from local manufacturers in India, we are still way behind. In a simple thing, for example, silicon spoons. We are actually way behind. So what has India done actually because India has a major quality issue. In most of the things, we are basically producing, leaving aside some niche industries, we are basically producing low quality products. And the other point was on the first question, which I asked, that I am, of course, not implying that we are pushovers militarily. I agree over there. My question was more in respect of the political dispensations, the political will, that how, because mostly the problem has been that there has been diffidence on the political side. So how true is this perception that the military delivers when it requires, but then politically it is not followed up with assertive diplomacy and assertive measures? And this is the reason we keep on losing at the border. So that was actually just think of my question. And of course, I would like to know a little more from you that how are we following up? We are really behind China. Because even if we say that we are not going to buy from them, fact means we don't have anything on our side of equally good quality. So what capacity, how much, to what extent have we built capacities internally? Thank you.
So I've forgotten how you started, Yanup. But okay, let me answer it my way. If the political, without the political backing, you can't prepare yourself in the armed forces to fight a war and to spend so much of money and to have the forces there and sustain such forces there. So while I do not agree with you saying that the political will is absolutely evident. It may not be in writing, it may not be it may not be spoken in anger or that manner. But look at the way the modernization is on, and look at the way we have pushed across an infrastructure and in all manner of things. The word which I gather one is get prepared. Without saying so, the political hierarchy is telling the military, get prepared, get ready, and we will provide you the support. Now, what you are saying is, why are they not saying it? It doesn't need to be said. It needs to be executed, done. And this is a point I want to say, is that whatever is happening on the ground and how the forces are reacting and sustaining and modernizing and getting prepared is an issue here that we need to be prepared with, and there's a political backing to get ourselves ready to this one. So I finished that issue here. What the public says, China word nahi bol rahe hain, China ke ye nahi bolte hain. The deeds dekho na. Look at the deeds. Look at the execution. Look at how issues are being pushed. Look at how money is being granted. Look at how the modernization being carried out, focused on the China. Is that not also being said? It is a method of saying it. So I will differ with you on the political issue, and I think the political hierarchy has come up boldly into this one in this manner, and the world has recognized it. Now, about the trade issues, I agree with you. You know, I absolutely stand by you. We just cannot de-link ourselves with the Chinese trade. We need to get prepared. I think that we know that there are discrepancies and there are shortfalls here in India, which we need to match up. We have to get alternatives to get our thing going. I think we are moving to a plan. My good guess is that we are moving to a plan on very many issues. All the issues, you know, the hardware, it's very difficult for us to now catch up with hardware. We have caught up with software. We have done very well on software, and we are world class and plus plus. But the issue of hardware is a process that we will take some time. Maybe engines in an issue which will take time, you know. But we recognize that there is a problem here. So you offset your strengths with your weaknesses. So you have to balance it out. I think you mentioned about semiconductors. Yeah, yes, semiconductors are issue. Semiconductors issue for Chinese also. The best on quality semiconductors even Chinese don't have. They have to buy from Taiwan, and Taiwan doesn't supply them the best of semiconductors, which are used for warfare purposes, because those are under ban by the United States. So, you know, there are issues here, and we need to work. Some things will take a long time. I'll also end by saying that, look, asymmetrically large nations like United States fought with asymmetrically weaker nations, much weaker nations. Afghanistan, you see Vietnam, you see Korea, you see Syria. Everywhere the Americans have come out in a huff here. They haven't been successful. Where do you say Americans have been? Asymmetrically, Iraq, when they said, the president said, okay, all is good, hunky dory. But there's no hunky dory, is still not hunky dory in after 20 years in Iraq. So the fact is that look at now Russia. Russia is a great power. But you know, Ukrainians, which are a much lower power, of course supported by the West, have been able to do some kind of resistance to the Russians. So to say an asymmetrically large power and is on the borders, and how will you fight him, or what will you do? Asymmetrically weaker nations, and we are not a weaker nation, but asymmetrically weaker nations have succeeded in history very well against asymmetrically large powers. And that is it's how you fight, not with what you fight. It is the strategy and the doctrines behind it. That is what matters. And I think there is where we need to say a few things. Thank you very much.